Imagine this. In the quiet of an ordinary night, the sky is split open by fire. A shape, older than Earth itself, tears through the atmosphere at impossible speed. Within seconds, the world you know is erased. Continents shattered, oceans boiling, the air itself igniting. This is not science fiction. This is the reality of what would happen if 3I Atlas, a wandering interstellar body, struck the Earth. No walls, no borders, no shelters would matter. Humanity would stand beneath a force older, heavier, and more merciless than anything it has ever faced. At what time of day are you watching this? If you'd like to support these stories, a like or a subscribe helps. But before we give in to fear, we must ask, what is 3I Atlas? Why has its name passed like a whisper through the halls of astronomy? And why does its presence make us question not only the fragility of Earth, but the very meaning of survival? 3I Atlas is no ordinary comet. It is interstellar, meaning it does not belong to our solar system. It comes from elsewhere, from the cold abyss between stars. Only 2 other such travelers have been seen before. 1I Oumuamua in 2017 and 2I Borisov in 2019. Both crossed our skies and then slipped away into the dark. 3I Atlas is the third, and its approach has forced us to face the question, what if one of these visitors did not simply pass by? What if it collided with Earth? The difference between an asteroid born here and one from beyond is speed. Local asteroids circle the sun at tens of kilometers per second. Interstellar objects, however, arrive like bullets from the void, carrying unimaginable momentum. A body only a kilometer wide, if interstellar, could deliver an impact equivalent to millions of nuclear weapons, far surpassing anything in recorded history. History shows us what even smaller impacts can do. The Chicxulub event, 66 million years ago, ended the age of dinosaurs and reshaped life itself. A rock, no more than 10 kilometers wide, erased entire ecosystems in a single day. The Tunguska event in 1908 flattened 2,000 square kilometers of forest, and that object never even touched the ground. Multiply those forces by interstellar speed, and the scale of destruction becomes almost unthinkable. And here lies the first conflict of our story. We exist at the mercy of the sky. We build cities, civilizations, dreams, yet all of it rests beneath a cosmic lottery we cannot control. To know this is not to invite fear, but to face reality. Earth is not safe, and it never has been. In the silence between stars, objects like 3I Atlas wander endlessly. Some pass unnoticed, some flash briefly across telescopes, and one day, one of them may not miss. The cage of atmosphere and gravity that makes Earth our home could also be the stage for our end, and so the story begins not with comfort, but with confrontation. We are small, the universe is vast, and when the two collide, the outcome is never balanced. It is absolute. The discovery of 3I Atlas did not arrive with fanfare, but with a whisper. On April nights in 2020, telescopes of the Atlas Survey in Hawaii captured faint streaks of light crossing the black canvas of the sky. At first glance, it was nothing unusual, just another comet among the thousands catalogued every year. But then, as astronomers plotted its path, the numbers refused to fit. The orbit was wrong. The speed was too high. This was not a body bound to the sun. It was moving too fast, too freely to belong here. And with that realization, 3I Atlas was confirmed as the third known interstellar visitor to our solar system. For the scientific community, the discovery was at once exhilarating and sobering. Interstellar objects are like messages thrown into a vast ocean, bottles carrying fragments of alien worlds. Before 3I Atlas, there had been two such messages. The first, in 2017, was Oumuamua, a cigar-shaped mystery that slipped past Earth before anyone knew quite what it was. The second, in 2019, was Borisov, a comet more familiar in appearance with a tail of gas and dust trailing behind it. 3I Atlas, however, was different. Its trajectory was steep, its brightness unstable, as if its very structure was fragile, disintegrating under the heat of the sun. It was both comet and enigma, burning faintly as it rushed through our system at nearly 30 miles per second. And here lies the first conflict. The discovery of such an object is both wonder and warning. To study it is to peer into a fragment of another star system, older perhaps than Earth itself, formed in alien dust and carried across light years. But to watch it fly past is also to imagine what would happen if its path were just a little different. Astronomers could not help but calculate trajectories, and though 3I Atlas posed no real danger, its crossing raised the specter of possibility. If one object has come close, others will, and if one day one of them does not miss, the outcome will not be curiosity, but catastrophe. The mathematics tell a stark story. Even a fragment of interstellar rock, no more than a kilometer wide, could strike Earth with an energy greater than the detonation of millions of nuclear weapons. The Chicxulub impactor, which ended the reign of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago, was of that scale. It reshaped the biosphere, erased entire species, and turned the planet into a furnace. Now, imagine the same, but faster. An object not drifting in the quiet gravity of our solar system, but hurled at us by the vast tides of the galaxy. Speed multiplies energy. A small interstellar visitor could rival the destruction of much larger local asteroids. And so, in the quiet halls of observatories, excitement mixed with unease. Each interstellar object we detect reminds us that Earth is not isolated. We are not shielded by distance, not hidden from the universe. Our solar system is open, porous, vulnerable to wanderers that do not ask permission to enter. Some come close, some vanish without notice. But the fact remains, the void is not empty. It is alive with motion. Here comes the mini-climax. The discovery of 3I Atlas was not just about this one comet. It was a reminder of probability. If we have already seen 3 such visitors in just a handful of years, how many more pass unseen? How many scrape the edge of our vision, too dim to detect, too far to track? And if interstellar objects are this common, then eventually one of them may not pass harmlessly by. This thought unsettles because it pierces the illusion of safety. We think of Earth as permanent, as secure, as the stage on which human history will continue endlessly. But the cosmos is indifferent. It has erased worlds before. It will do so again. We may live as though the sky above is only stars, but to astronomers, every detection is a reminder. The sky is also filled with bullets. And yet, there is also wonder. For in each passing visitor, there is knowledge. Dust from 3I Atlas may hold chemistry from distant suns. Its very existence is proof of the restless exchange of matter across the galaxy. To witness it is to glimpse how vast the universe truly is, and how fragile our own place within it. So as 3I Atlas burned faintly and broke apart under the sun, the danger passed. But the question it left behind did not. If this one missed, who is to say the next will? And if the universe decides otherwise, how ready are we to face what comes? To understand what an interstellar impact would mean, we must first understand the scale of the object itself. 3I Atlas, like its predecessors, was not vast on a cosmic level. Estimates placed its nucleus at just a few hundred meters across, perhaps as large as half a kilometer, before it began breaking apart. By terrestrial standards, it was small, smaller than mountains, even smaller than many cities. But in space, size is only half the equation. The other half is speed. Local asteroids within our solar system orbit at speeds of 15 to 25 kilometers per second. Interstellar bodies like 3I Atlas arrive faster, often exceeding 30 kilometers per second. That difference may not sound large, but energy increases with the square of velocity. A rock twice as fast is not twice as deadly, it is 4 times as destructive. At 30 kilometers per second, even a half-kilometer wide body carries energy beyond human comprehension. Here lies the conflict. Humanity measures force in megatons, the destructive yield of nuclear weapons. But the energy of a collision with 3I Atlas would not be measured in megatons. It would be measured in hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of them. A single strike would unleash power greater than all the nuclear weapons on Earth combined, detonated at once. The Chicxulub impactor, 10 kilometers wide, released the energy of more than 100 million megatons, extinguishing most life on Earth. 3I Atlas, smaller, would not equal that devastation, but its interstellar speed narrows the gap. Even at a fraction of Chicxulub's size, its strike could trigger a catastrophe on a global scale. Cities would not survive. Nations would not survive. The question would not be who wins, but who endures. Imagine the moment of impact. A flash brighter than the sun itself. Shock waves tearing across continents. Oceans rising into walls of water. The atmosphere choked with dust and ash, plunging the planet into darkness. Agriculture would collapse within months. Starvation, disease, chaos. All the structures of human civilization unraveling as quickly as they were built. The difference between a thriving world and a dying one could come down to a fragment of rock, traveling unseen until it was too late. And here comes the mini-climax. The most chilling detail is not the destruction itself, but the scale of uncertainty. We do not know how many such objects wander between stars. We do not know when one might appear. And because they travel so quickly, our warning time could be terrifyingly short. Not centuries, not decades, but perhaps only weeks. This thought unsettles, because it forces us to confront fragility in the starkest way. We like to imagine control, governments, science, technology, keeping us safe. But against an interstellar bullet, control is an illusion. The Earth has been struck before. It will be struck again. The only unknowns are when and by what. Yet there is also awe in this reckoning. To calculate the power of such an event is to glimpse the scale of the universe itself. Forces so vast, so absolute, that human history seems no more than a flicker of a candle in the storm. And yet here we are, asking the question, imagining the unthinkable, daring to wonder what it means. So we begin to see the true weight of 3I Atlas is not only in its mass or its speed, but in the shadow it casts on our certainty. It is a reminder that survival has always been provisional, fragile, resting beneath a sky that does not ask our permission. If 3I Atlas were to strike Earth, the place of impact would decide the shape of our fate. Nearly 3/4 of the planet's surface is covered by water, which means the most likely target is the ocean. At first, this might sound like fortune, Better a rock falls into the sea than onto a city, but the ocean, vast and deep, is no shield. In truth, it is the most dangerous stage of all. The hook lands sharply. Imagine a body half a kilometer wide slamming into the Pacific at interstellar speed. The water does not absorb the blow, it magnifies it. The impact would vaporize millions of tons of seawater in an instant, unleashing a column of superheated steam and debris that would tear upward into the atmosphere. Around the point of collision, walls of water kilometers high would rise, racing outward as tsunamis that would not stop at coastlines. Entire nations would vanish beneath moving mountains of the sea. Here lies the conflict. Civilization is built along coasts, cities, ports, industries, all clustered where land meets ocean. The very geography that sustained humanity would betray it. Tsunamis would sweep across the Pacific in hours, reaching the Americas, Asia, and Australia in relentless succession. The Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, all would join the chain reaction, wave after wave, until every shore on Earth bore scars. But the destruction of coastlines would only be the beginning. The vaporized seawater, mixed with dust and molten fragments of rock, would rise into the upper atmosphere. Carried by winds, it would spread across the globe, creating a shroud that would block sunlight. For months, perhaps years, the earth would sit in twilight. Crops would fail, temperatures would fall, the oceans themselves would cool, shifting currents, collapsing weather systems. And here comes the mini-climax. The paradox of an ocean impact is that it kills twice, once with water and again with sky. First the waves, drowning millions, then the long hunger as fields wither and ecosystems collapse. Humanity would not end in fire, but in cold, famine, and silence. This thought unsettles because it reveals how fragile our balance is. We depend on the rhythm of the seasons, the reliability of sunlight, the patience of the soil. An impact in the ocean would sever all of it, replacing order with chaos. The sea that has always given life would, in a single day, become the engine of extinction. And yet, even here, there is perspective. To imagine such destruction is to grasp the scale of our planet itself. The oceans are deep, ancient, powerful, and so are the forces that move against them. Humanity is small not only in space, but in time. The ocean has seen impacts before, it will see them again. Whether humanity remains to witness the next is not guaranteed. So the question sharpens. If the sea is both cradle and coffin, what does it mean to live, knowing that its calm surface hides the possibility of our end? If the ocean is a cradle that becomes a grave, the land is no less dangerous. An impact on solid ground carries its own brutal consequences, different in shape but equal in scale. Where water magnifies destruction through waves and steam, land transforms it into fire and dust. The hook cuts sharply. Imagine 3-eye Atlas slamming into a continental plain at 30 kilometers per second. In a fraction of a second, rock melts, soil turns to glass, and a crater tens of kilometers wide opens in the blink of an eye. Shock waves radiate outward faster than sound, flattening forests, cities, mountains, everything in their path. The ground itself ripples like water, transmitting the force across entire continents. Here lies the conflict. Unlike the ocean, which drowns, the land burns. The kinetic energy of the strike would ignite vast wildfires as forests, grasslands, and even concrete structures erupt in flames. The atmosphere would fill with soot, dust, and pulverized stone hurled upward with such violence that it would spread around the globe. Within days the sky would dim. Within weeks sunlight would be strangled. But the greater threat is not the crater nor the fire, but what comes after. Crops would fail under darkened skies. Photosynthesis would halt. Food chains would collapse from the bottom up. Humanity, with all its technology and knowledge, would face the same fate as countless species before it. Extinction, not from the immediate blast, but from the long shadow of aftermath. And here comes the mini-climax. The paradox of a land strike is that survival is possible, but brutal. Those far from the crater might live through the blast, but they would inherit a dying world. The true battle would not be against the impact itself, but against the slow unraveling of climate and sustenance. The earth would not simply burn, it would starve. This thought unsettles because it forces us to face the fragility of the systems we depend on. Civilization thrives on stability, stable climate, stable harvests, stable trade. An impact on land would shatter all three: borders, politics, economies. None of it would matter when the sky turns black and the soil grows barren. And yet, there is awe in imagining the scale of such an event. To picture the Earth reshaped in seconds is to recognize the planet's raw power, far beyond anything humanity can command. The continents we think eternal are only temporary, written and rewritten by the hand of cosmic chance. So the question deepens: if land itself can betray us, if the ground beneath our feet is no safer than the sea, then what does security truly mean? Perhaps there is none. Perhaps safety has always been an illusion, shattered in an instant when sky meets earth with unstoppable force. The impact itself would last seconds. The true catastrophe would unfold over years. Whether 3I Atlas struck land or sea, the sky would change. Dust, soot, and vaporized rock would rise high into the stratosphere, carried across the globe until sunlight itself became a memory. Scientists call this aftermath impact winter, a cousin to the nuclear winter feared in the age of atomic weapons. It is not fire that ends civilizations, but the long, cold darkness that follows. The hook pierces sharply. Imagine stepping outside at noon and finding twilight. Imagine weeks without the sun, then months. Crops wither, temperatures plunge, rain patterns collapse. The very rhythm of the earth, light and warmth, growth and harvest, is broken. Humanity has survived wars, plagues, and famines, but never the deliberate shutting off of the sun. Here lies the conflict. We are creatures of climate. Civilizations depend on stability, on the quiet balance of air, soil, and water. Impact winter would unravel that balance. Fields across continents would fail simultaneously. Oceans would cool, changing currents, collapsing ecosystems from plankton to whales. Forests, already burned or flattened, would not regrow under a blackened sky. Humanity would not face one crisis, but all crises at once: famine, disease, conflict, and despair. Models suggest global temperatures could drop by more than 10 degrees Celsius in the first year alone. For comparison, the last ice age was triggered by far smaller shifts. Snow would fall where it had never fallen before. Rivers would freeze. The delicate web of modern agriculture, designed for predictable seasons, would collapse entirely. Stored food would run out in months. Billions would face starvation, and here comes the mini-climax. The cruel irony is that those who survived the blast may envy those who did not. To live in the shadow of impact, winter would mean watching the world grow colder, hungrier, and quieter. Cities would empty. Governments would falter. Human connection would shrink to small circles huddled in the dark, keeping the last flames alive while waiting for the sky to clear. Survival would not be measured in wealth or technology, but in endurance, in the ability to last against a silence deeper than any humanity has known. This thought unsettles because it reveals how fragile our triumphs are. Electricity, medicine, trade, knowledge all depend on food, on warmth, on stability. Remove the sun, and all the scaffolding of civilization crumbles. The impact would not only strike Earth's surface, it would strike the idea of progress itself. And yet, even here, there is a strange clarity. To imagine impact winter is to understand how precious every sunrise is. The sun is so constant, we forget it is a gift. Only in imagining its absence do we see its true worth. Impact winter is not just a nightmare of destruction. It is a reminder of the fragile threads that hold life together, threads we take for granted until they break. So the question turns inward. If we knew that tomorrow might bring years without sunlight, how differently would we live today? The first waves of destruction would be swift, coasts erased, cities burned, skies choked. But the greater trial would come after, in the cold years of impact winter. The question would not be how many died in the blast, but how many could endure the silence that followed. The hook cuts deeply. Billions live on harvests that rely on sunlight. Remove that light, and famine becomes inevitable. Within months, food stores would vanish. The global supply chains that link farm to market would collapse. Nations with fertile fields would be no stronger than those without, because no field can feed in the dark. Hunger would spread across every border, indifferent to wealth or power. Here lies the conflict. Humanity has technology, but survival is not guaranteed. Underground bunkers, seed vaults, and stockpiled grains might keep a fraction alive. Some nations maintain reserves measured in months, a few in years. But no storehouse is infinite. Eventually, all must face the same truth. To endure, people must adapt to a world without sunlight. Scientists imagine solutions. Underground farms lit by artificial lamps, hydroponic systems fed by dwindling energy supplies, carefully rationed protein from insects or fungi. In theory, these methods could sustain small populations. In practice, scaling them to billions would be impossible. Power grids would fail. Fuels would run out. What remains would be local, fragmented, fragile. Survival would belong to pockets of humanity scattered across the globe, isolated by collapse, clinging to improvised means. And here comes the mini-climax. Survival would no longer be about progress, but regression. Civilization would unravel into fragments. Cities abandoned, governments broken, communities shrinking to what they can carry, defend, and grow without sunlight. Those who survive the longest may be those who already live with less. Communities used to scarcity, to hardship, to resilience. The irony is sharp. The modern world, built on abundance, would suffer most when abundance is gone. This thought unsettles because it forces us to admit how unprepared we are. We believe ourselves powerful, masters of nature, yet our survival still rests on something as simple as sunlight falling on leaves. Remove that, and our power is revealed as fragile illusion. The blast of 3I Atlas would be catastrophic, but the true test of humanity would come in the years after, when the question is no longer how to build, but how to endure. And yet, even in this vision of collapse, there is a thread of hope. Humans have endured ice ages before. Our ancestors lived through famine, plague, and fire. We are fragile, but we are also stubborn. In the darkest winters, fire still burned and voices still told stories. Perhaps, scattered and diminished, humanity would endure again, not as the civilization we know, but as the seed of something new. So the question lingers, in a world without sunlight, would we find enough light within ourselves to survive? If survival after impact is nearly impossible, the only true defense lies in prevention. To stop an interstellar body like 3I Atlas before it strikes Earth is the dream of planetary defense, a dream both inspiring and terrifying, because it demands a confrontation with forces far greater than our own. The hook hit sharply. Imagine watching a point of light in the sky, knowing it is aimed directly at Earth, carrying the power to erase civilization. There is no second chance, no negotiation, no delay. The only hope is to act before it arrives, to deflect the path of a bullet fired across light years. Here lies the conflict. We have theories, even small experiments, but no proven method. The simplest idea is kinetic impact, slamming a spacecraft into the object to nudge its trajectory. NASA's DART mission tested this in 2022, striking an asteroid and shifting its orbit by a measurable degree. For a small asteroid discovered years in advance, this might be enough. But for something like 3I Atlas, moving faster than most local objects, the margin for success narrows drastically. The window of response could be months, not decades. Another idea is nuclear detonation. By exploding a device near the surface of the object, the sudden release of energy could vaporize material, creating a thrust that shifts its path. But this carries risks. Break the body into fragments, and you may not save Earth, only ensure multiple impacts instead of one. The power required to deflect a half-kilometer-wide interstellar visitor at speed would push nuclear technology to its limits. Then there is the concept of slow push methods, solar sails, gravitational tractors, or lasers nudging the object over long spans of time. Ingenious in theory, they require decades of preparation, constant observation, and infrastructure we do not yet possess. Against an object like 3I Atlas, appearing suddenly from the void, such methods would be useless. And here comes the mini-climax. The cruel truth is that planetary defense works best against what we know. Against the familiar asteroid circling the sun, we may one day succeed. But against an interstellar traveler, fast and unpredictable, we are nearly powerless. Technology may buy us time, but time itself is the rarest resource. If the warning is too short, even the strongest ideas collapse into futility. This thought unsettles because it forces us to face the limits of our ingenuity. We imagine ourselves prepared, yet our defenses are prototypes, our strategies theoretical. A real impact would not be a test. It would be the final exam, with no chance to retake. And yet, there is resolve here. To even attempt planetary defense is to admit responsibility for our survival. To strike a rock in the void is to declare that life matters, that we will not simply accept extinction as fate. Success is uncertain, but the act itself is a testament to the will to endure. So the question sharpens. When the sky itself becomes the enemy, can our fragile tools rise to meet it? Or will we discover that our reach is still too small for the vastness of space? Our first line of defense is sight. To stop a wandering body like 3I Atlas, we must first see it coming. But in this, too, humanity is fragile. The night sky is vast, the stars uncountable, and our instruments are still small compared to the scale of what moves among them. The hook pierces. Even in the 21st century, we have mapped only a fraction of the objects near Earth. Most asteroids larger than a kilometer in size are catalogued, but smaller bodies, still capable of regional or even global damage, remain hidden in the black. Interstellar visitors are rarer still, but their danger is multiplied by their speed. They appear suddenly, crossing into our solar system without warning, their paths steep, their time short. By the time we notice, it may already be too late. Here lies the conflict. Modern telescopes scan the skies nightly, yet they are limited by field of view, by weather, by funding, by the very curve of Earth itself. A rock approaching from the direction of the sun is invisible until it passes by. Clouds, moonlight, even budget cuts can blind our watchmen. The cosmos offers no mercy for human bureaucracy. Consider Oumuamua, the first interstellar object ever detected. It was spotted only after it had already passed Earth, slipping by unseen until it was almost gone. 2I Borisov, the second, was discovered earlier, but still offered no time for meaningful study. 3I Atlas, breaking apart under the sun, was noticed only because it betrayed itself with brightness. If any of these had been on a collision course, humanity would have had months at best, and perhaps only weeks. And here comes the mini-climax, the unsettling truth that we may never see the one that matters. The final warning might not be a news headline or a telescope image, but a sudden streak of fire across the sky, too fast to stop, too close to avoid. The very instruments we rely on are fragile shields against forces that do not wait for us to be ready. This thought unsettles because it strips away the illusion of control. We think of ourselves as explorers, scanning the universe with precision. But the universe is vast, and we are still blind in most directions. For every comet we catch, countless others slip unseen through the dark. And yet, in that thought, there is also humility. To know that we are small is not only frightening, it is grounding. It reminds us that our existence has always been precarious, that survival has never been guaranteed, and perhaps that knowledge, quiet and sobering, is its own kind of preparation. So tonight, when you look at the stars, remember, they are not only distant lights, but also the silent paths of wanderers. Most pass without harm, but some, unseen, unknown, may already be on their way. If we wish to understand the scale of what 3I Atlas could do, we must look backward. The Earth remembers. Its scars are written in stone, in craters, in layers of ash. Our planet has endured countless impacts, some small enough to vanish into obscurity, others vast enough to reset the very course of life. The hook cuts in with weight. 66 million years ago, a rock about 10 kilometers wide fell from the sky near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. In an instant, the reign of the dinosaurs ended. The Chicxulub impact released the energy of over 100 million megatons. Fires spread across continents. Shock waves circled the globe. The sky filled with ash, blocking the sun for years. What followed was not just the death of creatures, but the death of an era. Mammals, once small and fragile, inherited a world remade by fire and darkness. Here lies the conflict. Chicxulub was local, born of our solar system. It moved at the speeds of ordinary asteroids. But even so, it was enough to change everything. Now imagine 3I Atlas, smaller perhaps, but moving faster. Energy is squared with speed. A half-kilometer interstellar traveler could rival devastation far larger than its size would suggest. The difference is not in mass, but in velocity. Not all impacts are so ancient. In 1908, over the Siberian wilderness, the Tunguska event flattened more than 2,000 square kilometers of forest. The object was only tens of meters across, yet its explosion equaled hundreds of atomic bombs. Had it struck over a city, millions would have perished in an instant. Humanity calls it a near miss, but the truth is simpler. We were lucky, and luck is no defense. The Earth bears hundreds of craters, each a silent reminder that the sky is never empty. Most are ancient, worn by time, but the possibility remains alive. Our history is not only wars and empires, it is also rocks from the void, shaping what rises and what falls. And here comes the mini-climax, the unsettling realization that extinction and survival may hinge on random trajectories. If Chicxulub had missed, dinosaurs might still walk the earth. If Tunguska had arrived hours later, history books would tell a different story of the 20th century. And if 3I Atlas, or one like it, were aimed at us, then human civilization itself would be the variable. This thought unsettles because it reduces all of our complexity to chance. Kings and nations, science and art, all of it can be swept away by a stone falling from the dark. Yet it also humbles us, reminding us that life has always balanced on the edge of chaos. So perhaps the lesson is not only fear, but perspective. Impacts have ended worlds, but they have also made space for new ones. Without Chicxulub, there would be no humans to wonder at the stars. Without Tunguska, perhaps we would not grasp how fragile our luck is. Each scar on Earth is not only a wound, but a reminder. Destruction and creation are twins, forever bound. Asteroids are not strangers to us. They are family members of our solar system, bound by the gravity of the sun, moving in predictable paths we can study and map. But interstellar visitors like 3I Atlas are outsiders, arriving uninvited, crossing our skies with speeds and trajectories that defy familiar rules. This difference, subtle in numbers, is immense in consequences. The hook strikes sharply. A local asteroid might move at 15 or 20 kilometers per second. That speed is destructive enough, as history proves. But 3I Atlas entered our system at nearly 30 kilometers per second and perhaps faster. Energy is not linear. Double the speed, and the destructive force quadruples. A body too small to destroy civilizations under local conditions can become catastrophic at interstellar velocity. Here lies the conflict. We prepare for threats we know, the asteroids we can chart, the orbits we can trace. We imagine that with enough telescopes, enough warning, we can nudge them aside. But interstellar objects do not give us that luxury. They come faster, leave sooner, and offer warning measured not in decades, but in months or weeks. A local asteroid is a neighbor who might someday visit uninvited. An interstellar object is a bullet fired blindly into the crowd. Their composition may also differ. Some are fragile, breaking apart near the sun like 3I Atlas did. Others may be denser, stronger, born in the hearts of alien systems with chemistries unlike our own. We do not know, and in that uncertainty lies danger. To face an interstellar body is to face the unknown itself, armed with theories, but lacking proof. And here comes the mini-climax. The unsettling truth is that interstellar objects are not only more dangerous, they are also inevitable. Our solar system drifts through the galaxy like a ship in a sea filled with debris. Every star system births fragments, flinging them outward into the void. We are not protected. We are only lucky. To exist in this universe is to live in the path of countless wanderers, most unseen, most harmless, but not all. This thought unsettles because it shifts our sense of safety. We are not in control, not even close. Our charts and telescopes give us the illusion of mastery, but against the vastness of interstellar space, they are toys. We watch the skies with fragile eyes, knowing that at any moment something older than Earth could cross our path, carrying extinction on its surface. And yet, there is also wonder in this difference. Each interstellar object is a messenger, a fragment of another world passing briefly through our own. They remind us that the galaxy is alive, exchanging dust and stone across light years. To study them is to touch something alien, to glimpse a story larger than Earth itself. So we are left with a paradox. Interstellar objects are threats, but also gifts. They may bring extinction or knowledge. They may destroy us or remind us why survival matters. And in that paradox lies the essence of the human condition, to live in wonder, even when wonder carries danger. When astronomers speak of an interstellar impact, they do not speak in vague terms. They run models, equations, and simulations that turn imagination into numbers. These models are not prophecy, but they offer glimpses into what might unfold if a body like 3I Atlas struck Earth. The results are chilling, not because they are uncertain, but because they are consistent. Devastation on a planetary scale is not an exaggeration, but a mathematical inevitability. The hook opens directly. Computer simulations show that even a half-kilometer object moving at interstellar speeds could release more energy than every nuclear device on Earth combined. The initial blast would carve a crater tens of kilometers wide. Shock waves would radiate outward with speeds faster than sound, flattening everything in range. Firestorms would ignite across continents, driven not by flame alone, but by the superheated winds racing outward from the point of impact. Here lies the conflict. Models are precise, but they also carry assumptions. Scientists must ask, does the object strike land or sea? Does it break apart in the atmosphere or remain intact until the surface? A shallow entry could spread energy across a wider area, while a deep strike would concentrate force into a single cataclysmic explosion. Every variation changes details, but none change the outcome. Collapse of climate, collapse of ecosystems, collapse of human survival on any large scale. Some models compare the scenario to the Chicxulub event. The difference is velocity. Chicxulub's asteroid traveled at perhaps 20 kilometers per second. 3I Atlas, at 30 or more, multiplies the energy exponentially. Even at half the size, the damage narrows toward equivalence. That is the cruel lesson of physics. Speed transforms small into catastrophic. And here comes the mini-climax. The most sobering simulations show not just immediate effects, but long-term climate consequences. Dust and aerosols rise into the stratosphere, creating a veil that blocks sunlight. Temperatures plummet globally within months. Photosynthesis falters, agriculture fails. Entire food chains unravel. In these models, survival becomes less about geography and more about luck, where you are, what you have, and how quickly you can adapt. This thought unsettles because it makes survival a statistical anomaly rather than a guarantee. Humanity is not at the center of these equations. We are variables, fragile outcomes dependent on random chance. Models treat us as side effects, not central figures. The cosmos does not calculate with compassion. It calculates with mass, speed, and energy. And yet, there is perspective here too. By modeling these catastrophes, We are not surrendering to them. We are preparing, even in small ways. Each equation, each simulation is a declaration that knowledge matters. To imagine is to resist. To run the numbers is to admit fear, but also to face it. So the question rises softly at the end of these models. If the universe will not protect us, can our awareness itself become a kind of shield not against the rock, but against the blindness of never asking what could come? When 3I Atlas was first confirmed as interstellar, the scientific community responded with a mixture of awe and unease. To witness such a traveler is a privilege. These objects are not bound to the sun, not chained by familiar orbits. They come from the deep dark between stars, fragments of alien systems crossing our path for the briefest of moments. For astronomers, the chance to study one is like receiving a letter from another world. The hook strikes with clarity. Discovery meant excitement. Instruments turned toward the sky. Data poured in. Papers were written with urgency. What was its composition? Did it resemble the icy comets we know, or was it stranger, denser, formed in alien conditions? Every telescope aimed at it promised answers to questions older than humanity itself. Here lies the conflict. While scientists spoke publicly of curiosity, beneath the surface lingered a quiet, unspoken tension. Interstellar objects are rare, yet in only a few years, 3 had been seen. Were they truly so uncommon, or had we only just opened our eyes? If 3 have already passed, how many have gone unnoticed? And if one day one did not miss, what then? Conferences filled with excitement also carried shadows. For every diagram of its orbit, there was also the unasked question, what if the line had crossed Earth? What if the numbers had pointed not to escape, but to collision? No one wanted to say it aloud, but the thought echoed in the silence between slides. And here comes the mini-climax. In the end, 3I Atlas broke apart near the sun, disintegrating into fragments too faint to follow. For some, this was disappointment, the end of data, the loss of a chance to study more deeply. For others, it was relief. The object had proven fragile, unstable, a reminder that not every visitor survives its journey through our system. But the disquiet remained. If one breaks apart, another may not. This thought unsettles because it reveals the double edge of discovery. To look outward is to learn, but also to invite fear. Each new interstellar visitor expands our knowledge, but also deepens the realization that we live in a universe not designed for our comfort. The cosmos does not hide its dangers. It only waits for us to notice them. And yet, there is beauty too. For a brief time, humanity turned its eyes upward together, not in fear, but in wonder. 3I Atlas reminded us that the universe is alive, dynamic, filled with motion beyond our comprehension. It gave us a glimpse, however fleeting, of the infinite stories unfolding beyond our sky. So the reaction was not one note, but a chord. Awe, fear, curiosity, relief. And perhaps that mix itself is the most human response possible when the universe sends us a messenger from the dark. When people hear of objects like 3I Atlas, the first question is always the same. How likely is it to hit us? The mind craves numbers, probabilities, reassurance in the face of something so vast. Astronomers have tried to answer, and their statistics offer both comfort and unease. The hook lands directly. Large impacts are rare. A body 10 kilometers wide like the Chicxulub asteroid strikes Earth perhaps once every 100 million years. Smaller impacts, a kilometer or so across, may occur every 500,000 years. And yet, on the scale of geological time, These numbers are not distant. They are rhythms in Earth's history. The last cataclysm ended the dinosaurs. Another will come. The only unknown is when. Here lies the conflict. For local asteroids, we have begun to chart probabilities with some confidence. Surveys suggest that most of the truly large bodies near Earth are known, tracked, and pose no imminent threat. But interstellar objects are different. They are unbound, unpredictable, their paths crossing ours without pattern. We cannot say how often they arrive because we have only just begun to notice them. 3 in a few years suggests they may be far more common than once believed. Statistically, the chance of a specific interstellar visitor striking Earth is minuscule. Space is vast, and most pass harmlessly into the dark. But probability is deceptive. Even rare events become inevitable given enough time. A bullet may pass you by 1,000 times, but fire enough of them, and one will find its mark. And here comes the mini-climax. The paradox of cosmic statistics is that they comfort us while hiding the truth. The odds of an impact in any given year are tiny, so small they almost vanish. But across centuries, across millennia, the odds approach certainty. The Earth has been struck before. It will be struck again. To deny this is not safety, but blindness. This thought unsettles because it reframes probability not as a shield, but as a clock. Low odds do not mean safety. They mean waiting. Every day the universe rolls the dice. Every day we tell ourselves that the numbers are in our favor. But the dice are endless, and we only need to lose once. And yet there is also clarity in numbers. To know the scale of risk is to confront it honestly. Statistics remind us that we are not uniquely cursed, nor uniquely safe. We are part of a cycle written into the fabric of planetary history. Life endures not because the dice never fall against it, but because it adapts when they do. So the numbers, though cold, leave us with a human question. Will we use them to comfort ourselves into silence, or to prepare for the day when probability becomes reality? Numbers can be comforting. When we hear that the odds of a catastrophic impact are 1 in a million each year, we breathe easier. We tell ourselves, not in my lifetime, not in my children's lifetime, maybe never at all. But numbers are not shields. They are stories we tell to quiet the fear of the unknown. The hook pierces sharply. Imagine standing on a train track, told that a train passes only once every 100 years. If you are there when it comes, probability does not matter. You are either alive or you are not. Cosmic impacts are the same. Their rarity is meaningless when measured against their scale. One strike is enough to erase everything. Here lies the conflict. Humanity clings to the illusion of safety, building civilizations as if permanence is guaranteed. Cities rise, empires fall, and still we act as though the earth will never betray us. The statistics become lullabies, soothing us into complacency. Yet the history written in craters proves otherwise. The planet remembers what we choose to forget. Astronomers track the skies, issuing reports and probabilities. Governments file them away, comforted by the low odds. But this comfort is fragile. It relies on the assumption that we will always see what approaches in time, that the numbers account for every possibility. They do not. Interstellar objects like 3I Atlas defy those calculations. They arrive unannounced, faster, stranger, and potentially deadlier than our models predict. And here comes the mini-climax. The cruel truth is that we may be reassured until the day reassurance fails. When fire streaks across the sky, no statistic will matter. The illusion of safety will shatter in a single moment, replaced by reality that we have always lived beneath a sky capable of ending us. This thought unsettles because it reveals how much of civilization is built on denial. We cannot function if we fear the heavens every day, so we bury the fear in numbers. We tell ourselves the risk is distant, abstract, irrelevant. Yet the universe does not share our illusions. It moves as it always has, scattering stones across the void, indifferent to our comfort. And yet, within this fragility lies perspective. To accept that safety is an illusion is not despair. It is clarity. It reminds us that life has always been precarious, that survival has always been borrowed time. Perhaps the true strength of humanity is not in guarantees, but in our ability to live fully even when none exist. So the question becomes, are we content with comfort built on illusions, or will we face the truth that security has never been promised and only preparation gives us a chance to endure? If fragments of humanity survived the initial blast and the long winter that followed, the true trial would only begin afterward. Survival is not recovery. To live through catastrophe is one thing. To rebuild from its ashes is another. The earth would still turn, but the world would not be the same. The hook strikes. Imagine scattered enclaves of survivors, small groups huddled in bunkers, caves, or improvised shelters, emerging years later to find a planet scarred beyond recognition. Forests gone, fields barren, oceans altered, the air still heavy with dust. The ruins of cities stand as skeletons, monuments to a civilization too vast to sustain itself in the new world. Here lies the conflict. Civilization as we know it depends on scale. Billions of people linked by trade, powered by electricity, sustained by global systems. But those systems would be gone. Survivors would face a world stripped back to essentials: food, water, fire, shelter. Technology, if it endured, would quickly falter. Without supply chains, without factories, without fuel, machines would rust into silence. Knowledge, stored in servers and books, would outlast people, but only for those who can preserve and read it. For generations, survival would mean regression. Communities might return to agrarian life, though with soil poisoned by ash and skies dim, harvests would be fragile. Hunting, fishing, gathering, skills long forgotten in modern cities, would become vital again. Small groups would thrive or vanish based not on wealth, but on resilience, adaptability, and luck. And here comes the mini-climax. Recovery would not be measured in decades, but in centuries. Perhaps in some distant time, human societies would rediscover iron, rediscover engines, rediscover electricity. But the arc of progress would not be certain. Humanity might rise again to build cities or remain scattered in small tribes, whispering stories about a world of lights that fell when the sky turned dark. This thought unsettles because it reveals how thin the line of civilization truly is. We imagine progress as inevitable, a ladder always climbing upward. But progress is fragile. It depends on conditions, on abundance, on stability. Remove those, and the ladder crumbles. What took centuries to build can be undone in a single day. And yet, there is hope buried in this vision. Humans have always been survivors. Fire was once a miracle. Language was once an invention. Every tool we now take for granted was born from desperation. If even a fraction of humanity endured, perhaps they would find a way to begin again, carrying fragments of memory forward into a new chapter. So the question is not only whether humanity would survive Three-Eye Atlas, but what form that survival would take. Would we rebuild the world we lost, or create something entirely different, smaller, harder, but perhaps wiser? The physical destruction of an impact is only part of the story. The greater wound might not be to the land or the sea, but to the human mind. Even before the first fire falls, the knowledge alone carries a weight that few can bear. Humanity is not only fragile in body, it is fragile in spirit. The hook opens sharply. Imagine waking every morning knowing the exact day the sky will burn. Imagine the certainty that all you love, all you build, will vanish in a flash of fire and dust. For many, survival would end long before the impact. Fear itself would become the first wave of destruction. Here lies the conflict. Modern society thrives on the illusion of control. We live by calendars, routines, and promises of tomorrow. A confirmed impact would strip all of that away. Governments might try to maintain order, but panic would spread faster than information. Markets would collapse. Religions would swell with desperate followers. Violence would rise as some sought to seize the last comforts of life while others surrendered to despair. The impact would already have begun, not in the sky, but in the mind. Even after the strike, survivors would carry scars deeper than any wound. To live through the fire and into the dark would mean carrying memories of a world erased, cities turned to ash, loved ones lost, the sun itself stolen by dust. Trauma would not fade quickly. It would echo through generations, shaping cultures built on survival and fear. Children born into the silence would inherit stories of the end, myths told around fires about the day the sky fell. And here comes the mini-climax. The most haunting truth is that humanity may never truly recover psychologically. Even if we rebuild, even if we rise again, the memory of fragility would linger. Civilization might grow cautious, obsessed with the sky, with defending against the next visitor. Or it might grow reckless, driven by the knowledge that all progress is temporary. The impact would change not only landscapes, but the way humans think about existence itself. This thought unsettles because it exposes how fragile meaning is. We build identities, nations, and cultures on the belief that life has direction, that progress is real. A single impact could shatter that belief, leaving humanity adrift in a universe that feels indifferent, even hostile. Without the comfort of permanence, what stories would we tell ourselves to go on? And yet, within this fear lies a strange kind of liberation. To know that nothing is guaranteed may also teach us to value the present more fiercely. Every sunrise, every breath, every fragile moment of connection becomes more precious when we understand how easily it can vanish. The fragility of meaning is also its strength. So perhaps the true psychological question is not how to erase the fear of impact, but how to live fully even with that fear, knowing the sky is not only beautiful, but dangerous, and choosing to look upward anyway. When the sky itself becomes the instrument of destruction, humanity does not only turn to science, it turns to belief, religion, philosophy, myth. These are the ways people have always tried to make sense of chaos. A strike from Three-Eye Atlas would not only shatter landscapes, it would shatter, reshape, and ignite the very fabric of human faith. The hook lands directly. In the days before the impact, cathedrals and temples would overflow. Old rituals would return. Some would pray for deliverance, others for forgiveness. Prophets and false messiahs would rise, claiming the end as proof of their visions. To many, the comet would not be a rock from the void, but the hand of God, the fulfillment of Scripture, the long-promised apocalypse. Here lies the conflict. Religion can comfort, but it can also divide. Competing interpretations of the disaster would clash violently. Was it punishment, a test, or simply the blind cruelty of nature? Some would accept it as destiny. Others would rage against it, demanding answers the universe does not give. In the absence of certainty, belief itself would become the battlefield. Philosophy would face its own reckoning. Thinkers would ask, if life can end so suddenly, does progress have meaning? Are justice, beauty, and morality anything more than fragile illusions erased in the blink of a cosmic eye? For some, the knowledge would deepen despair. For others, it would ignite a fierce urgency to live, to create, to leave something behind, however fleeting. And here comes the mini-climax. After the impact, survivors would carry these questions into the silence. Faith might harden into new religions, built around the memory of the day the sky fell. Perhaps they would see themselves not as victims, but as chosen, spared to rebuild. Or perhaps they would see the universe as cruel and indifferent, shaping a philosophy not of hope, but of endurance. Either way, belief would not vanish. It would transform as it always has, adapting to a new world. This thought unsettles because it reveals how fragile our systems of meaning are. Theologies built over centuries could collapse in weeks under the weight of fire and ash. Philosophies that once seemed eternal would feel naive in the face of extinction. The impact would not only test survival of the body, but survival of the stories we tell ourselves about why we exist. And yet, there is a strange resilience here. Humanity has always turned catastrophe into myth. Floods became epics. Plagues became parables. Even destruction can birth meaning. Survivors of 3I Atlas might look up at the scarred sky and tell their children not only of loss, but of endurance. That even when the heavens struck, life found a way to continue. So perhaps the final question is not whether faith would survive, but what shape it would take. Would it bind us together or divide us further? Would it offer hope or chain us to fear? The universe gives no answers. It leaves us to decide. When the first calculations confirmed that 3I Atlas could cross dangerously close to Earth, the question would not only be scientific, it would be political. Governments do not thrive on silence. They thrive on control, or at least the appearance of it. A threat from the stars would test not only the limits of technology, but the limits of power. The hook strikes directly. Imagine the first emergency meetings, screens glowing with orbital data, officials demanding certainty where none exists. Scientists speak in probabilities, politicians demand absolutes. Will it hit or will it not? The truth, that the future is uncertain, is not a language politics understands. Here lies the conflict. To admit the possibility of impact risks panic. To deny it risks betrayal when fire appears in the sky. Some leaders might conceal the threat, hoping to maintain order until the last moment. Others might declare it openly, rallying nations toward planetary defense. But defense requires unity, and unity is fragile. Rivalries do not vanish under pressure. They sharpen. Each nation would ask, who decides? Who commands the rockets, the weapons, the limited resources? History suggests the outcome would be fractured. Some governments would prepare in silence, building bunkers for the powerful stockpiling supplies for the chosen few. Others would turn outward, promising to save as many as possible, yet lacking the means. The world would split between those who cling to secrecy and those who cling to hope. And here comes the mini-climax. Politics would not vanish under the shadow of 3I Atlas. It would intensify. Nations might cooperate to build a deflection mission, or sabotage one another, fearing betrayal. The dream of a united Earth might flicker, but old divisions, old suspicions would remain. In the race against time, humanity's greatest enemy might not be the rock itself, but its inability to act together. This thought unsettles because it reveals the weakness of our systems. We imagine governments as protectors, but in truth, they are fragile constructs built on fear, ambition, and compromise. Against the impartial violence of the cosmos, such constructs seem small, even absurd. What is a parliament or a senate compared to a stone half a kilometer wide, moving at 30 kilometers per second? And yet, within this vision, there is also possibility. A cosmic threat might be the only force powerful enough to remind humanity of its shared fate. Borders mean little to a comet. Politics mean nothing to extinction. Perhaps, in the face of certain death, cooperation would finally triumph, not out of generosity, but necessity. Survival has a way of stripping illusions bare. So the question remains, would we face 3I Atlas as one world, or as many divided fragments, too distracted by ourselves to see the fire falling from the sky? When the possibility of impact becomes undeniable, the conversation shifts from politics to action. Leaders can argue, but the clock does not stop. The question becomes brutally simple. What can humanity actually do with the tools it already has? The hook lands hard. Our most powerful rockets, Falcon Heavy, SLS, Long March, Soyuz, were built to lift payloads, not to fight celestial bullets. Our nuclear weapons, terrifying in human wars, are fragments of what would be needed to nudge an interstellar rock from its path. Against 3I Atlas, the arsenal of Earth looks less like defense and more like desperation. Here lies the conflict. Time is everything. If discovered decades in advance, humanity might build massive missions, fleets of kinetic impactors, nuclear devices designed not for war but for survival, even experimental concepts like solar sails or directed energy beams. But if the warning is only years or months, the range of possibilities shrinks sharply. Launch infrastructure is limited. Factories cannot conjure rockets overnight. Research that takes decades cannot be compressed into days. The reality is sobering. At best, we might manage a handful of launches carrying hastily designed impactors or warheads toward the object. Success would depend on precision, coordination, and luck. If the trajectory is too steep, if the speed is too high, even those desperate measures might fail, and humanity would discover too late that its technology is still young compared to the demands of the cosmos. And here comes the mini-climax. The cruelest irony is that we have the knowledge, but not the preparation. Scientists have long warned that planetary defense requires investment before disaster, not after. But warnings are easy to ignore until fire is visible in the sky. In the shadow of 3I Atlas, all the wealth, all the armies, all the industries of Earth might suddenly seem powerless, because preparation begun too late is no preparation at all. This thought unsettles because it reveals the fragility of our pride. We call ourselves advanced, yet we are still beginners in the language of survival on a cosmic scale. Our tools are clever, but small. Our ambitions vast, but slow. Against the momentum of an interstellar visitor, arrogance becomes dust. And yet, within this bleak picture, there is a glimmer of resilience. Even a failed attempt would not be meaningless. To try is to declare that humanity refuses silence, refuses surrender. Perhaps the effort would inspire future generations, leaving behind the beginnings of true planetary defense. Perhaps the failure of today would become the preparation of tomorrow. So the question deepens: when fire comes from the sky, will our machines rise as shields, or will they be remembered as monuments to a civilization that waited too long to act? When the sky becomes a clock counting down to extinction, survival is no longer the only question. Humanity, even in its last days, would ask another: what remains of us when we are gone? In those final months, the struggle would not only be to endure, but to preserve, to leave behind some trace of who we were. The hook strikes. Archives would swell with desperate projects, servers filled with data, books printed in haste, monuments carved into stone. Satellites might be launched carrying messages, hoping they would outlive the planet that sent them. From great institutions to small households, people would scramble to capture their lives, their languages, their art, all the fragile threads of memory woven into something that might survive the fire. Here lies the conflict. The urgency of preservation collides with the inevitability of loss. Digital records may burn when power grids fail, paper may rot, stone may crumble. Even rockets, cast into the void, could drift silently until destroyed. How do you preserve meaning when the very planet is about to be erased? The paradox is cruel. The harder we try to save ourselves in memory, the more we realize memory itself is fragile. Artists would paint, sing, write, not for galleries or stages, but for the simple defiance of creation. In bunkers and ruins, poetry would be whispered, songs carried into the dark. Parents would tell stories to children, knowing those stories may never be told again. The impulse to create, to express, would burn brightest when time was shortest. And here comes the mini-climax. The haunting truth is that perhaps none of it would last. The libraries, the servers, the monuments could vanish as easily as cities, and yet the act of preservation itself would carry meaning. To try to leave a mark, even when the universe promises erasure, is the essence of being human. Creation becomes resistance. Art becomes defiance. This thought unsettles because it reveals how fragile legacy is. We imagine history as permanent, yet most of it has already vanished. Civilizations older than ours are known only through fragments of pottery, faint etchings on stone. If 3I Atlas struck, future life, insect, mammal, or something new, might find only broken hints of what we once were. To them, we would be myth, not memory, and yet there is comfort in this vision. To create, even in the face of extinction, is to affirm that life had meaning. Even if no one remembers, the act of remembering ourselves matters. Humanity may vanish, but in its last breath it would still paint, still write, still sing. So the question endures: is legacy found in what survives, or in the act of trying to preserve it, even knowing it may not? The earth is not only human. Long before us, countless forms of life thrived, adapted, and vanished. If 3I Atlas struck, the fate of the planet would not end with people. It would unfold across forests, oceans, deserts, and skies, across all the creatures that share this fragile home. The hook opened sharply. In the first days, destruction would be merciless. Herds of animals would burn in firestorms. Birds would fall from skies choked with ash. Oceans would boil near the impact, killing fish by the millions. Ecosystems finely balanced over millennia would collapse in hours. For many species, there would be no escape, no adaptation, no second chance. Here lies the conflict. Extinction would not strike evenly. The large, the specialized, the fragile, elephants, whales, predators at the top of food chains would be most at risk. Their size and needs would betray them when resources dwindled. Meanwhile, the small, the hidden, the overlooked, insects, rodents, burrowing creatures would have a better chance. Survival favors not the strong, but the adaptable. Forests turned to ash would give way to scrubland. Oceans stripped of plankton would struggle, but in the dark, deep-sea life, already adapted to scarcity, might endure. Microbes, ancient masters of survival, would outlast everything. Even in the frozen silence of impact winter, bacteria would thrive beneath the soil, beneath the sea, in places where catastrophe cannot reach. And here comes the mini-climax. The cruel truth is that life would not end. It would reset. New winners would rise from the ruins. Insects could dominate the land. Rats, already thriving in human shadows, might inherit the earth after humanity is gone. Evolution, relentless and blind, would begin to write a new story on the ashes of the old. This thought unsettles because it forces us to admit we are not the center of life. We are only one branch among many. The earth does not need us to go on. If we vanish, it will continue, not with our children, but with other creatures, carrying forward their own futures, indifferent to ours. And yet, there is a strange comfort in this too. To know that life will endure, even without us, is to know that the earth itself is resilient. It has survived fire, ice, poison, and time. It will survive us as well. Perhaps, in the silence after 3i Atlas, the world would grow quieter, smaller, but still alive. And in that life, the story of Earth continues. So the question remains, if survival is inevitable for life, but uncertain for humanity, does it humble us or inspire us to fight harder for our fragile place in the chain? The oceans are Earth's lungs, its heartbeat, its oldest memory. They cover most of the planet, sustain most of its life, and regulate its climate. If 3i Atlas struck, the oceans would not simply suffer. They would transform, reshaping the entire biosphere for centuries to come. The hook cuts deeply. In the first seconds after impact, if the strike came to sea, walls of water kilometers high would race outward. Tsunamis would swallow coastlines, erase cities, drown islands. Entire nations would vanish beneath waves that cared nothing for borders. Even if the rock struck land, the oceans would not escape. Debris, ash, and vaporized stone would fall back into the sea, poisoning waters with heat and chemicals. Here lies the conflict. Oceans are resilient, but also fragile. Their balance depends on currents, on temperatures, on the tiny plankton that form the foundation of food webs. An impact would shatter that balance. Sunlight blocked by dust would kill plankton on a massive scale. Without them, fish would starve, whales would die, coral reefs would bleach into deserts. The seas would not go silent all at once, but they would grow emptier year by year, tide by tide. Currents, too, would shift. With the atmosphere altered and temperatures plunging, the great conveyor belts of ocean circulation would falter. The Gulf Stream, the Antarctic upwellings, the deep currents of the Pacific, all would weaken or collapse. Weather patterns across the globe depend on these flows. Without them, storms would change, rains would vanish from some lands and flood others, Humanity would feel the ocean's pain in every harvest, every drought, every storm. And here comes the mini-climax. The cruelest transformation might be in chemistry. Fires ignited on land would rain soot and toxins into the sea. Acid levels would rise. Oxygen levels would fall. Whole zones of the ocean could become dead waters, barren stretches where nothing larger than bacteria could endure. What we call life would retreat to the margins, leaving behind a vast, empty silence where once there was abundance. This thought unsettles because it reveals how deeply the oceans hold the threads of our survival. We breathe their air, we eat their gifts, we depend on their stability. To wound the seas is to wound ourselves. And yet, an impact does not ask whether we are ready for such a wound. It simply delivers it. And yet, there is endurance in the deep. Creatures of the abyss, already accustomed to darkness and scarcity, might live on unchanged. Bacteria in hydrothermal vents would thrive as if nothing happened, their ancient metabolisms indifferent to surface chaos. Life in the deep has seen mass extinctions before, and it has always survived. So perhaps the question is not whether the oceans would recover, but what kind of oceans would return. Would they rise again full of reefs and whales, or would they belong to new rulers, smaller, stranger, born of the silence after catastrophe? The rhythm of day and night is the oldest clock we know. Long before calendars, before writing, before fire, humans measured time by the rising and setting of the sun. But if Three-Eye Atlas struck, even this most ancient rhythm would falter. Light itself, the boundary between waking and rest, would vanish into something unrecognizable. The hook cut sharply. Imagine a dawn that never brightens. The sun rises, but the sky remains gray, dim, heavy with dust. Noon feels like twilight. Shadows stretch endlessly, yet stars remain hidden, smothered by ash. Night falls not into clarity, but into a darkness thick and absolute, without moonlight, without constellations, only the weight of a sky gone blind. Here lies the conflict. Life depends on light. Plants need it for photosynthesis, guiding the cycles of growth and harvest. Animals follow it for migration, for reproduction, for hunting and survival. Humans live by it too, their bodies tuned to circadian rhythms. Without reliable day or night, all these patterns unravel. Crops fail. Animals grow disoriented. Sleep itself becomes fragile, fractured, unmoored from the cycle of sun and shadow. Communities would burn fires for warmth and light, but even flames would feel weak beneath the canopy of smoke. Artificial light might survive for a time, in bunkers, in hidden shelters, but electricity depends on fuel, and fuel depends on systems that would collapse quickly. In the silence after impact, the Earth would fall into a half-light world, neither day nor night, but a dim, unending dusk. And here comes the mini-climax. The most haunting vision is of generations who might grow up never knowing a clear sky. Children born after the impact could live and die without seeing the sun as we know it, only a faint glow behind smoke. Stars, which once inspired myths and dreams, would vanish. The cosmos itself would be hidden, as if the universe had turned its face away. This thought unsettles because it reveals how much of our identity is tied to light. We speak of enlightenment, of clarity, of illumination. We find comfort in sunrise, wonder in starlight. Take that away, and something deeper than survival is lost. A world without true light is not only colder, but lonelier. And yet, within that darkness, life might still adapt. Creatures of the night would thrive, their senses sharpened for silence. Humans, too, might learn to live by memory rather than sight, preserving stories of the stars as treasures. And when, centuries later, the skies cleared at last, the first sunrise would be more than light. It would be rebirth. So the question lingers, could humanity endure not only the loss of warmth and food, but the loss of the very sky, and still remember what it meant to live beneath the stars? The Earth's surface is not fixed. Mountains rise, rivers carve valleys, continents drift. But these movements happen on scales of millions of years, so slow that we imagine the ground beneath us as permanent. If 3I Atlas were to strike, that illusion would be broken in a single instant. Geology, normally patient, would become violent. The hook strikes. At the moment of impact, energy equivalent to billions of nuclear bombs would be released into the crust. Rock would not merely break, it would vaporize. Mountains would crumble into dust. Oceans would be pushed from their basins. In a flash, landscapes shaped over eons would be erased, replaced by a scar deeper than anything human eyes have seen. Here lies the conflict. Our planet's surface is dynamic, but it rarely reveals its violence within a human lifetime. We live in a lull between catastrophes, mistaking calm for safety. An interstellar strike would awaken the buried powers of Earth itself. Earthquakes would ripple outward from the crater, tearing apart fault lines, collapsing cities, reshaping coastlines. Volcanic chains could ignite as pressure redistributes, spewing ash and lava into an already darkened sky. Rivers would be rerouted, lakes drained or born anew. Geography would rewrite itself in days, but the violence would not end at the surface. The impact would echo through the mantle, shifting tectonic plates, perhaps even altering the long drift of continents. The scars would last not for years, but for millions of years, visible from space, a wound engraved into Earth's memory. And here comes the mini-climax. The unsettling truth is that the planet itself would endure even as it changes. The land we know, the Alps, the Amazon, the Great Rift Valley, could vanish or transform, but new mountains would rise, new rivers carve their way across the ruins. The earth is not fragile, it is mercilessly strong. It erases us not by dying, but by continuing without us. This thought unsettles because it reveals our smallness. We think of monuments and cities as eternal, but they are only surface scratches. One strike is enough to erase them all, leaving behind nothing but stone, fire, and water. Human history would vanish into layers of rock, indistinguishable from the fossils of creatures long extinct. And yet, within this brutal vision, there is awe. To witness the earth remake itself is to see its true nature, alive, restless, unbound by our needs. The same forces that destroy also create. From craters come new seas. From ash comes fertile soil. In time, landscapes reborn from catastrophe might surpass the beauty of what was lost. So perhaps the question is not whether Earth would survive 3I Atlas. It would. The question is whether humanity could accept a world remade, knowing the land we once called home is gone forever. Humanity has always turned disaster into story. Floods became myths of deluge. Eruptions became tales of angry gods. Plagues became tests of faith. If 3I Atlas struck Earth, even if civilization collapsed, the memory would not vanish. It would transform, carried forward not as science, but as legend. The hook strikes. Imagine the survivors, centuries later, telling their children of the day the sky burned. They would not speak of interstellar trajectories or kinetic energy. They would speak of fire dragons falling from the heavens, of a wrathful sky, of the great silence that followed. Details would fade, but awe would remain, shaping myths as enduring as the stars themselves. Here lies the conflict. Memory is fragile. Without books, servers, or telescopes, the scientific truth would erode. The story of Three-Eye Atlas might be reduced to whispers around campfires, exaggerated with every retelling. Some groups might remember it as punishment, a cosmic judgment. Others might remember it as renewal, the death of an old world and the birth of a new. Over time, facts would dissolve into symbols, and symbols into faith. Myth would become the framework for survival. Rituals might emerge to honor the sky, to appease it, to guard against its anger. Constellations could be reinterpreted as warnings, every bright star a reminder of the day the heavens fell. Even generations that never saw the fire would live under its shadow, their cultures bound by stories of survival and loss. And here comes the mini-climax. The haunting truth is that such myths might outlast us. If humanity eventually rose again, rediscovering science, those old legends would be reinterpreted once more, perhaps dismissed as superstition, or perhaps recognized as echoes of a real event. Just as today we search for traces of ancient catastrophes in mythology, future humans might search their own myths for the memory of Three-Eye Atlas. This thought unsettles because it reveals how easily truth becomes story. What we call science now might one day be remembered as myth. What feels certain today could be retold tomorrow as parable. The line between knowledge and legend is thinner than we admit, and catastrophe is the hand that erases it. And yet, there is beauty in this process too. Myths are not lies. They are vessels. They carry meaning across centuries, even when details are lost. If the story of Three-Eye Atlas survived as legend, it would still testify to one truth, that humanity once lived, once feared, once endured beneath a dangerous sky. So perhaps the real legacy of such a strike would not be ruins, but stories, fragile, mutable, but enduring. Stories that remind whoever comes after us that even when the heavens fell, humanity tried to make sense of the fire. Art is humanity's oldest form of resistance. Long before history was written, it was painted on cave walls, carved into stone, sung in voices carried by firelight. If Three-Eye Atlas struck Earth, and if survivors remained, art would not vanish. It would transform into mourning, into memory, into defiance against silence. The hook strikes with clarity. Imagine survivors emerging into a ruined world, painting crude images on rock walls of a burning sky. They would not sketch equations or orbital paths. They would draw fire descending, seas rising, shadows swallowing the land. They would sing songs of thunder and darkness, their rhythms echoing the terror of that day. Art would become a language of survival, a way to make sense of the incomprehensible. Here lies the conflict. In times of abundance, art flourishes in beauty, detail, complexity. In times of collapse, it strips down to essentials. Brushes might be made from ash, pigments from soil and blood. Instruments might be nothing more than wood struck against stone. Creation would survive, but transformed, raw, desperate, born not from luxury, but from the need to remember. Communities might shape new symbols. A circle split by a line could represent the broken sun. A spiral might symbolize the endless dusk. Songs might be built on chants of survival, prayers woven into rhythm. Every piece of art would carry both beauty and grief, reminding survivors not only of what was lost, but of what endured. And here comes the mini-climax. Centuries later, those artworks might be the only record left. Future generations could stumble upon cave walls filled with images of fire or fragments of bone flutes echoing sorrow. They would not know the science, but they would feel the fear, the awe, the attempt to preserve meaning when all else failed. In this way, art could outlast memory, speaking across time when words are gone. This thought unsettles because it reveals how fragile culture is. Libraries, museums, and digital archives might vanish, erased in flames or drowned by tsunamis. But a carved symbol in stone, a song remembered by children, could endure. The grandest works of our age may fade, while the simplest works of desperation might survive. And yet, there is hope in this too. Art does not need permanence to matter. Its power lies in the act of creation itself. To sing in the dark, to paint in the ruins, is to declare that life still has meaning. Even when the sky burns, the human spirit resists erasure through beauty. So perhaps the legacy of Three-Eye Atlas would not only be destruction, but creation, fragile, imperfect, but enduring. Art that whispers across centuries. We were here, we saw the fire, and we still tried to make something beautiful from it. Science does not only seek to explain the present, it seeks to speak to the future. Even in catastrophe, perhaps especially in catastrophe, scientists would turn their eyes forward. If Three-Eye Atlas struck Earth, they would ask not only how to survive, but how to ensure that some fragment of knowledge endures, even if humanity does not. The hook strikes. Projects would begin almost immediately. Digital archives copied onto hardened drives designed to withstand fire and flood. Libraries etched into metal plates, buried deep underground in vaults of stone. Satellites carrying data launched beyond Earth's orbit, entrusted to the stars themselves. These efforts would be frantic, urgent, carried out in the knowledge that time was short. Here lies the conflict. Knowledge is vast, but storage is fragile. How do you compress the entirety of humanity, our science, our languages, our history, into something small enough, durable enough, to outlast the destruction of the world? What do you choose to preserve, and what do you leave behind? The problem is not only technical, it is philosophical. Whose story becomes the story of all of us? Some would argue for pure science, the periodic table, mathematics, physics. Others would argue for culture, literature, music, art. Still others would insist on practical survival, instructions for farming, medicine, engineering. The archives would become battlegrounds of choice, reflecting not only what we know, but what we value most when faced with extinction. And here comes the mini-climax. The cruel truth is that even the most carefully prepared archives might never be found. Buried vaults could collapse. Satellites could drift endlessly through the void, their signals never reaching a receiver. Future life, whether human descendants or alien explorers, might never uncover them. The attempt itself might be the only legacy, a gesture of hope cast into silence. This thought unsettles because it reveals how fragile memory truly is. We imagine knowledge as permanent, yet it depends on fragile carriers, paper, silicon, metal. Against the violence of impact, these carriers are dust. To preserve ourselves, we must trust the most uncertain of forces, chance. And yet, there is quiet dignity in this effort. Even if the archives are never found, the act of making them affirms that knowledge matters. That truth is worth carrying forward, even into darkness. To etch equations into metal, to launch libraries into space, is to declare that humanity was not only a creature of survival, but of meaning. So perhaps the question is not whether our archives would endure, but whether the attempt itself would speak across time. To whoever might come after, human or otherwise, the message would be clear. We were here, we tried to understand, and even as the sky fell, we wanted you to know who we were. Time has always been humanity's invisible foundation. We live by it, measure it, divide it. Past is memory, future is promise, and the present is the fragile bridge between. But if Three-Eye Atlas struck Earth, time itself would fracture. The way we understand yesterday and tomorrow would change forever. The hook strikes. In the shadow of impact, the future would collapse into the present. The horizon, once endless, would narrow to weeks, days, hours. Calendars would lose meaning. Birthdays, anniversaries, elections, all the rituals of ordinary time would vanish. Every plan would be reduced to a single question. How many days remain before the sky burns? Here lies the conflict. Without the promise of future, human life becomes unmoored. We work for tomorrow, save for old age, build for generations yet unborn. Take that away, and meaning itself shudders. Why plant a seed if the harvest will never come? Why build if fire will tear it down? Time, once a path forward, becomes a wall rushing closer with every breath, and yet memory of the past would sharpen. People would cling to stories, to photographs, to relics of a world that once felt permanent. Museums would overflow with sudden importance, even as their future disappeared. Parents would tell their children about skies filled with stars, about summers that lasted, about the feeling of tomorrow stretching without end. The past would become sanctuary, even as the present grew unbearable. And here comes the mini-climax. After the strike, if survivors remained, time would fragment further. The old world would be spoken of as before, the new world as after. Generations would measure their lives not by centuries or dynasties, but by the wound in earth itself. We live after the fire, they would say. Time would no longer be a neutral flow, but a scar carried forward. This thought unsettles because it reveals how much our sense of self depends on time. We are creatures of anticipation, builders of futures. Take that away, and we are forced to live in a present too heavy to bear. The collapse of time is not only a collapse of schedules, it is a collapse of meaning itself. And yet, there is a strange liberation hidden in this vision. To know the future is short may teach us to value the present with fierce clarity. Every breath, every word, every fragile moment becomes precious when tomorrow is no longer guaranteed. In this way, time's collapse could also become a gift, not of comfort, but of focus. So perhaps the true question is not how much time humanity has, but how it chooses to live within it, whether measured in centuries or in the final hours before the sky falls. If Three-Eye Atlas struck and some of humanity endured, survival would not be their only burden. They would also carry the weight of memory. The catastrophe would not end when the fires burned out or when the skies cleared. It would live on in the minds of those who saw it, and in the stories they passed to those who came after. The hook strikes. Picture a small group of survivors gathered around a fire, telling children about the day the heavens fell. Their voices tremble, not only with fear, but with awe. They describe the flash, the thunder, the endless dusk that followed. The children, too young to remember, listen with wide eyes, inheriting a trauma that is not their own. Here lies the conflict. Memory is fragile, especially when carried only in words. Survivors would struggle between accuracy and myth. Some would cling to details, insisting that the story must remain scientific, true to what happened. Others would reshape it into metaphor, easier to pass on but less precise. In time, truth and story would merge until the boundary between them vanished. The burden of memory would not be light. Those who lived through the fire would carry images too heavy for words, cities collapsing, seas rising, skies filled with ash. They would face the choice of how much to share and how much to protect younger generations from. Silence might seem merciful, but silence risks forgetting. Words might preserve, but they would also reopen wounds. And here comes the mini-climax. In the centuries that followed, the memory of Three-Eye Atlas would become the foundation of new cultures. Some communities might treat it as sacred history, retold in ritual to remind each generation of humanity's fragility. Others might turn it into warning myths, teaching children never to trust the sky, and perhaps, in places where memory faded, the impact would survive only as rumor, a ghost in the soil, waiting for rediscovery. This thought unsettles because it shows how little control we have over our own story. What one generation calls truth, the next may call legend. What one survivor whispers as trauma, another may sing as parable. The catastrophe itself would be absolute, but its memory would be fluid, reshaped by need, fear, and hope. And yet, there is power in this fragility. Memory, however imperfect, ensures that humanity is not erased completely. Even if science fades, even if archives vanish, the act of remembering, of telling and retelling, keeps a spark alive. Stories are not only about the past, they are survival strategies for the future. So the question endures, will the memory of Three-Eye Atlas be carried forward as fear, as wisdom, or as both? Perhaps the answer depends less on the catastrophe itself than on the storytellers who remain. For all its terror, the idea of Three-Eye Atlas striking Earth carries a message far larger than destruction. It forces us to confront the question humanity has always avoided. What are we, truly, in the vastness of the universe? The hook strikes with clarity. We live on a small planet orbiting an ordinary star, in a galaxy among billions. Our civilization, with its cities, its monuments, its technology, feels immense to us. Yet to the cosmos, it is fragile, temporary, nearly invisible. One rock, moving faster than sound can be heard, is enough to erase everything we have built. Here lies the conflict. Humanity dreams of mastery, of controlling nature, of reaching the stars, of bending the world to its will. We believe our intelligence grants us power beyond limits, and yet the impact of Three-Eye Atlas would show how limited that power truly is. Against mass and velocity, against blind chance, intelligence is fragile. We are not rulers of the universe. We are residents, vulnerable tenants in a cosmos that does not notice us. Philosophy has long debated humanity's place. Are we central, chosen, significant, or are we accidental, fleeting, insignificant? An interstellar strike would answer without words. It would show that the universe does not bend to human meaning. It simply moves, indifferent, relentless. Our place is not at the center, but at the mercy of forces older and greater than we can comprehend. And here comes the mini-climax. The most unsettling truth is also the most liberating. If we are small, then we are also free. If the universe does not assign us meaning, we are free to create it ourselves. The threat of Three-Eye Atlas strips away illusions, but it also reveals the raw truth of existence, that life is precious because it is fragile, That meaning matters because it is not given, but made. This thought unsettles because it erases comfort, but it also deepens wonder. To know that we live in a cosmos capable of erasing us in an instant is terrifying. To know that, despite this, we love, build, dream, and endure is extraordinary. Our place is not one of power, but of defiance, a spark of consciousness in an ocean of silence. And yet, there is hope hidden in this perspective. To see ourselves as small is not to see ourselves as worthless. It is to recognize that every sunrise, every act of kindness, every fragile story is vast in its own way. The universe may be indifferent, but humanity is not. We care, and in caring, we create meaning that no rock, no void, no silence can fully erase. So perhaps the lesson of 3i Atlas is not only that we are vulnerable, but that vulnerability itself defines our place. We are temporary, fragile, but capable of wonder. And in that wonder, we find the courage to face even the fire falling from the sky. What then do we take from imagining the fire of 3i Atlas? We cannot hold the comet in our hands, nor stop the cold machinery of the cosmos. We cannot promise ourselves safety against the blind forces of mass and speed. But we can choose what such a vision means to us, not only as fear, but as understanding. The hook lands gently. The universe has never promised humanity permanence. Stars burn out, planets collide, galaxies tear at each other in slow violence. Against this backdrop, our existence is not secure. It is a fragile exception, and yet, in that exception, there is beauty. The very fact that we can imagine our end means we are alive now in this fleeting moment, capable of awareness. Here lies the quiet conflict. To dwell on destruction risks despair. To deny it risks blindness. Humanity stands between these two dangers, struggling to live fully while knowing how easily it all could end. The image of 3i Atlas hurtling toward Earth is terrifying, but it is also clarifying. It reminds us that life is not infinite, that civilizations are not eternal, that every sunrise is a gift we mistake for a guarantee. And here comes the final climax. Perhaps the purpose of thinking about such catastrophe is not to prepare for it, but to awaken to the fragility of what we have, to look at our world, oceans and forests, music and laughter, the small warmth of ordinary days, and to understand that they are precious precisely because they are temporary. The comet may never come, but the awareness it gives us can change how we live. This thought unsettles, but it also soothes. It replaces arrogance with humility, fear with presence. We may not outlast the stars, but we can fill the time we have with meaning. We can care for each other, create, remember, and wonder. The universe is vast, silent, indifferent. Yet in that silence, here we are, speaking, dreaming, imagining. So, in the end, the story of 3i Atlas is not only about destruction, it is about perspective. We cannot stop the fire of the heavens, but we can decide how to live beneath the sky while it is still calm. We can choose not despair, but gratitude, not paralysis, but wonder, not silence, but the fragile, luminous act of being human. And perhaps, when the last comet does come, it will not erase us completely. Because in the brief time we had, we looked upward and we understood. And that understanding itself may be the legacy we leave behind.